All right. Hey, everybody, it's Chris from Retzone. Welcome to another podcast. Today we are talking about
alternatives to collecting.
Wow,
So alternative options for collecting.
I blanked there for a sec.
Yeah, you kind of blank out to jump in there. Yeah, alternative options to playing games, collecting, alternative ways to collect right now, because collecting now is expensive.
I have Chris with me, obviously, and we got Ramon here.
Right here.
So, yeah, I mean, I know some of this is just like COVID effect. Games are expensive now.
Yeah, because that gaming has really exploded as a hobby over like the COVID period.
Well, people had all this vacation money sitting around that they had to do something with, or felt like they had to do something with, so they decided to make the prices of cars and video games go up.
Yeah, I mean, I know any collectible nowadays is expensive. Like anything that is collectible is suddenly shot up and just gone bananas.
Once this COVID thing is over, the market's going to get flooded with all this stuff that people have bought, and it's probably going to go back to what it was pre-COVID, I think.
Yeah, well, that's what I say too. To an extent, though.
Not all the way. But
Not all the way.
I think things like loose collecting, I think that's going to come back down to earth. Like, some of that shot up because just like games that... There's tons of it, like Super Metroid. There's tons of copies of the game. It's not like the game's hard to find. It's just everybody snapped it up because they all wanted to play it, and they had money. They didn't care what they spent, so they bought it. The thing is, well... Time goes on, people stop caring. They're like, I haven't played this game in years, and then they sell it. And they're just like, oh, whatever. And it tends to cause the price to kind of come back down to earth.
Yeah, it's a supply and demand thing.
Yeah, I mean, demand is high right now, like I said, for like anything collectible, anything entertainment. It's all up. It's all up there. I think things like complete in box or like sealed, I don't really see that going down.
Yeah, those will keep going up, I think.
Yeah, it's just the nature of it because as you get people into collecting, that's what they're going to be going for, right? They're not going to want to collect loose games. They're going to want to collect complete games or sealed games. And, I mean, you collect whatever you're happy with. Don't let anybody tell you how to collect, how not to collect. But I think in terms of, like, what's going to hold value, I think complete in box, especially, like, pristine copies of that sealed stuff, I'm like, I don't really see those coming down anytime soon. They weren't really big years ago because there wasn't as much demand for it. But I know... obviously, again, with the way, especially sealed collecting has just gone insane in the last, 2-3 years. Because recently there was I think it was kind of jumping way back. There was the Super Mario Brothers, the second print run of it, sealed, water graded. I think it was like a 9.8 A++ or 9.6 A++, something like that. And that was the second print run of it, and that sold for just over $100,000. And everyone was like, "Oh, it's insane! It's so much money. Like, it's never going to be worth that."
I remember that, yeah.
And everyone was all talk about that. And I mean, obviously, more recently there was it started with I think Zelda was the first.
I think it was like Ocarina of Time. I think.
Yeah, there was like a sealed copy of Zelda Ocarina of Time for the 64. That was like, I think it was 180,000 or something like that.
Oh, I don't remember that one.
There was a high, like that was crazy. And then shortly, like literally the next day in the same lot of auctions, there was the Super Mario Brothers 64, I think, that went for just over $1 million. I think it cracked,
which is a lot of money.
Yeah, which is insane. And then after that, the more recent one was I think it was Black Box Mario Brothers for NES.
Yeah, Super Mario Brothers for NES.
Yeah, which that one cracked. I think it was like $2 million.
$2.5 million, I think.
Yeah,
which is
like
insane amounts of money.
Yeah, which is insane. I know a lot of this too is like there's things like investors that are buying in, like they're buying it like a stock. Or everyone buys a portion of it, and then they're buying a portion of the game. And I'm like, that's kind of silly to me. I'm like, I don't really understand. They're buying it because they think the value is going to just keep going up. And, I mean, at some of the high end, I don't really see that. I think it's too new of a market to really say. It's all speculative right now, right? They're going to be like, well, this is the only one. It's like, well, it's the only one right now. I mean, obviously there's flow over where people are like, oh, well, now my Mario Brothers is worth $1 million. Like, well, no, it's not really. Like, you really got to get, there's a lot more nuance to why these things went as high as they did. That being said, I still think the pricing was insane.
Yeah, it's
But
ridiculous.
I'm like, I mean, I
That's a
understand some of the logic, but I think they kind of overinflated it a little bit. But yeah, that is what it is.
Well, I mean, look at the price of video cards. Like, Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it's-
End of the day, it's that
anything entertainment right now, it's all up there. But yeah, I mean, like I said, a lot of collecting right now, it's tough because it's expensive. You know, you don't want to be going and just buying a game that you're like, oh, I'm gonna play for a couple hours, and it's gonna be like $300. Like, oh, that's a bit much. I don't know if I
Right.
really want to do that.
And then you have the people overvaluing all their stuff, and they think they have a gold mine, and it's
Yeah, well, it's harder to find stuff now too, right? Because everybody's holding on to stuff, so it's getting harder to find stuff. It's harder to collect it. I mean, years ago it was a lot easier where you could just buy up lots of games, and if you're putting in the legwork, you could, make
Right.
some money and collect some games, and that worked out pretty well. Now it's a lot more difficult, but there is alternatives, So nowadays, I'd say people collecting, if you don't really care necessarily about the whole experience of it, obviously you have things like we spoke previously, things like EverDrives. You could buy EverDrives. I think those are typically $100. Maybe.
Yeah, 100, 200. They may be like expensive, but when you
Yeah.
consider the amount of games and the money you're gonna be saving,
Yeah.
if you just want to play the game,
Yeah.
it's a lot of savings.
I think it depends on the console too, because I think like the N64 one is like $300 or so. But I mean, even that, you look at the games that you want to get, and you say like, well, okay, well, am I spending more money on those games that I want, or am I spending more money on an EverDrive? And I think for the most part nowadays, you're going to be spending, you'll be getting less. You're spending less to get an EverDrive than to buy something like that.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, you're thinking, okay, if I want to play this insanely rare game and all I really want to care about is actually just playing this, I don't even care about the box, I don't care about the manuals, I don't care about anything else other than playing the game, probably just get an EverDrive and play that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really your cheapest option to kind of get on board now. I mean,
Unless you emulate it, I guess.
And then you have things like Sony talking about closing the PS3 game store, and everybody's panic buying PS3 games.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
And
a thing for a while.
That drives the price right up for those, so it
Yeah.
makes that hard for people to buy.
yeah, I mean, like definitely collecting older games right now is hard, just because I find the other thing is over time games are going to end up more in the hands of collectors who don't want to sell them, or they're going to end up in the hands of resellers who don't want to take a loss on them, or things like that. Like, you're not really seeing as much of the like, oh, I went to a garage sale and they had like Nintendo games for $1 a piece. You don't really see that, I don't think, as much anymore.
No, because
Everyone's more, I want to say, like, the market's more educated, where people have an idea of what it's worth. Now, obviously, the other side to that is that even though you know what something is worth necessarily, doesn't mean you're going to get that either, right?
Yeah.
If you know something is worth $50, well, I mean, who are you selling it to, right? If you're not using things like eBay, you're not using, I don't know, say like Amazon, but if you're not using like eBay or other auction or stuff like that, or Facebook where you're selling on there, you're not necessarily going to get that money you expect it's worth. It might be worth that to somebody, but if you're limiting your market, you're also limiting how much somebody's willing to pay or not pay for it.
I think part of the problem is retro gaming is turning into a business rather than a hobby now.
Yeah, but I think it's like, I mean, most collectibles have been like that for years. The thing is
That is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's almost an issue that compounds over time, where the longer people are like reselling things, the more collectible it is. When people aren't leaving that market, then like I said, games are never going back out in the wild, so to speak. They're all in the hands of people who know what the values, know how to sell it, know who to sell it to, and that tends to keep prices kind of a bit more afloat for keeping prices high. Because, like I said,
Yeah.
people don't want to sell stuff and lose money on it. They want to make whatever they paid for it. Like, even just people who are like, well, I mean, I spent $50 on this game. Well, I want at least $50 for it, right? Like,
How about the silliness of the Halo not for resale thing?
Yeah,
Yes,
I mean
yes.
that was a funny example.
That was a funny one.
I think that was about a year ago, and I hate to be like, I made a bunch of money off that, but that was ridiculous. Like people were buying because there was. That's the other thing I found too is the speculation drives a lot of this market right now.
Yeah.
Like people
Rumors
are like,
and
oh, this is gonna be
speculation.
so rare. It was only this. It was only that, and they don't really know because they're just new to the market. They don't really understand what they're saying. But people are buying Halo not for resale copies for like I think I saw it when as high as like $300.
Oh, it went that high, eh?
Yeah, for a little
Holy
while.
crap.
Like, but I sold a bunch of copies for like $100 a piece, and I was like, yeah, I have like 8 of them. Like,
Aha.
it's rare.
Quote unquote, right?
Yeah, and it's silly, right? Like it's all speculation, and there's gonna be winners and there's gonna be losers and stuff like that. I just kind of laugh because it's always the people who are new into the market, and when the game collecting market really started to kind of take off, you'd see that a lot more, where people all wanted to jump on the boat, right? They're like, oh, I'm gonna be a game collector and I'm gonna make so much money because look how much money there is in the market now. But they don't know what they're doing. They're just buying stuff and being like, well, this is rare. It's got I bought it for $50, but it's got to be worth $100. And it's like, well, then the market floods with it, and they're like, oh, maybe it wasn't as rare as I thought, and then you're kind of left holding the bag. And it's really a speculative driven market, like especially with anything newer, like anything like I'd say post PS2 era now. It's like so like PS3, original
PS3,
Xbox, Xbox 360, PS3. I'd say if somebody was like looking into getting collecting now, if you really like want to kind of get in on the ground floor, so to speak, it's harder to do now because, like I said, the market seems more educated to be like it's a lot quicker turnaround time between like, oh, this is rare, and then well now it's expensive. Like Switch games will be like they just discontinued it, and all of a sudden it like triples in price overnight, and it stays that high. Yeah. Because just everybody knows like immediately, well now you can't get this anywhere else. You got to buy it from me. They didn't make many of it.
Right.
And that like, makes things tough. Like
Super Mario
3D All Stars, that was a
Super
thing.
Mario 3D All Stars. There was speculation that it was going to be a limited run, so everybody snapped it up. And
I think that was a misconception though, because it was limited in the sense that they're like, well, we're only making it till this day. But the misconception being, they're like, oh, they're only going to make so many of them. But then they literally made enough for anyone who wants one can go out and buy one. Like it's not.
I mean, I got one.
You can still buy them as far as I know.
You can still buy them. Like the Game & Watch. Like I got a little bit caught with the Game & Watch because it's like, well, I'll buy it. I wanted it though, so I didn't really care. But I bought it right away.
I got one too.
I could have waited and got it later, but I was like, whatever. You can still go to the store. They'll still have like 80 Game & Watches sitting there.
P&P Games has them.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of speculative driven, a lot of like FOMO, a lot of people, fear of missing out. They want to have the next big game, and it's silly.
And even before this whole business, it was like the Nintendo classic consoles as well.
Yeah,
that was a thing for a while.
Yeah, where people were scalping that right when it came out, because it was like, well, that was kind of a weird situation because it was high in demand, but also limited in the sense that Nintendo wasn't really making much. They'd make like 3 consoles, would go to a store, and that was it for like a month. And it was like, what are you doing? Like Nintendo was weird about shorting supply though, because they did the same thing with Amiibos, where they really shorted supply when it first came out, and you just couldn't get them. If you wanted to get them, you're on the secondary market, and that was it.
I don't think they anticipated the demand for that thing.
I think they knew.
I think they played it a little.
I think they knew. I mean, you play your cards close to your chest, and if you know, like, hey, listen, we can make 100,000 of these, and we know every single one will sell, right? You're like, whatever, we made our money. And you're like, maybe we'll make a couple more, maybe another 200,000, and they all sell. And you just kind of drip feed it out, right? You're not ever flooding the market, and once they stop selling, you're like, okay, we're done, and you stop, right? You don't make any more. So there's things like that where it's kind of like, it's smart in a sense because you're driving that demand to be like, well, I gotta have it because they're only gonna make so many of them, and
right.
It's smart marketing on Nintendo on their end to do something like that, but I think it's a little predatory too because you're taking advantage of people's FOMO about stuff, and
they always did that, even with the original Nintendo.
Well, you had the Wii when it launched. It was like there wasn't really much stock going on.
Yeah.
That was like for months on end.
And now you can find used Wii's for $50 with like a ton of games.
So you
just
kind of
dumping
wonder
them
if
down.
you're one of the people who bought it on like an inflated price, that you're wondering why was I even looking at this in the first place?
Yeah.
You gotta wonder, right?
Earlier you touched on that it's hard to get on the ground floor when it comes to collecting now, and I believe that, and you also mentioned about you can't go to like garage sales and find NES games for $1, which when I first started doing this 15 years ago, that was exactly the case. You could get a whole box of Nintendo
Like a lot of games
for like $20. You could go to Value Village and find NES controllers, Super NES controllers, even NES games at Value Village.
Oh yeah, it'd be
No.
like nothing.
No, it's ridiculous.
That's the case now.
Yeah,
If
no.
any of those places find anything of value, they stick it on eBay and get prices.
Well,
for
that's
it,
the thing.
right?
Everybody wants to get their money's worth, right? And it's kind of like, wow, when everybody's a seller, like, I don't know who's a buyer anymore. So it definitely it gets harder. Like I said, I think it's harder nowadays to get into collecting, which it's almost killing the market itself because now you're not getting people into collecting. So then who's going to be the ones buying these later, right? When people stop collecting it, who's going to be the one to buy your collection? Who's going to be the one buying your games? If they never got into it to begin with, they're not just suddenly going to be like, oh, I'll buy a full collection. And that's why I was saying, I think with especially the loose games, those will kind of, I don't really see loose ever really holding value over time. Like usually that's going to be progressively dropping because people don't care about it anymore. They have other ways of playing it. You have things like EverDrives and stuff like that where you're like, well, I'll just spend $100, buy an EverDrive and just have everything.
Also,
or I spend $500 on this game.
I mean, look at all the clone consoles coming out of China right now.
Exactly.
That have like thousands of preloaded games on them. Right?
Exactly. So I think people don't have this nostalgia for those things, and they don't care to spend the money to have that whole experience because they never had it when they were a kid. They never grew up with it. They don't really care about it.
Right.
And they don't collect those consoles because it's prohibitively expensive. And I think, like I said, I think with Complete in Box, especially like the best examples of those, like best condition and things like sealed, I think those will hold for a lot longer. I don't want to say like, oh, they'll always hold, but I'm like, that seems somewhat of a fresher market. It's still like people in their 30s, their 40s who have maybe more disposable income now again, and they're like, well, you know what, I want to buy these games. Well, I don't want to just buy it loose. I'd rather have it, the whole box and manual and the whole 9 yards with it, because now it's like an art piece. It's my collectibles.
Exactly.
All right, so that tends to, and there's less of it too. It's harder to find, especially the cardboard ones, because people threw it out. So,
but also the bubble will burst eventually. I mean, it's
there's always going to be a point in time where eventually it will go down. I don't necessarily know if it'll burst per se, but I'm like, it will come down. There's no way it can maintain forever. And I mean, whether it's not our lifetime or not, well, doesn't matter. But it is a lot harder, I think, getting into collecting now. Like, somebody was like, I want to start collecting games. And it was like, now? I mean, you really need to look. Usually, they say about 2 generations back is your best time to buy stuff. Because it's not old enough to be collectible yet.
right.
And it's not new enough for people to care about owning it.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's a lot easier to be like, well, even like I'd say like 2 years ago, you could buy PlayStation 3 games, for $10-20. They're now going for like $100.
Some of them,
Right?
Yeah.
So it's finding that right, like it's knowing that right moment to buy stuff. And like my take on collecting, like I've been doing it we all have for years. My take has always been buy the stuff that nobody else is buying. If everybody's buying, Nintendo games, and you're like, well, I like Nintendo, I like Super Nintendo, I like Sega Genesis, I like Master System, I like Sega CD, and everybody's like, well, I'm buying all the Nintendo games, right? And that's driving all the prices up. And you're going, well, you know what? I like Genesis too. Nobody's really buying it, and I could get some deals on it. Buy a bunch of Genesis games. Then when everybody kind of moves on, and then they move to the next thing, right? Suddenly everybody's buying Genesis games. You're like, wow, look what I have all these Genesis games already.
The price goes up.
Right?
And then you benefit, right? It's like, okay, now you have all these games that nobody really cared about once upon a
they didn't
time.
care about it before, and then now they do care. So you can kind of like, you can almost, I mean, even if you said like newer, like if you're playing the long game and you're saying like, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to buy a whole bunch of PlayStation 4 games. I'm just going to, ones I enjoy playing, ones seem to be harder to find. And you got seeing some trends, and you're like, I'll buy these ones up when I find them for cheap, hang on to them for a few years, and then like, let's say you really like Super Nintendo games, you're like, I have like 8 copies of Godzilla for PlayStation 4. and you're like, well, you know what? I'll sell a couple and I'll buy some of those Super Nintendo games that I want, right? Because now you're selling it to collectors who are then speculating it's going to keep going up.
Yep.
And you're buying something that's already kind of stagnated on price, where you're like, it's not really going to go up anymore, so I'll buy that. So some of that's kind of like it's playing the market a little bit against itself, where you're kind of like find it when people are less educated about what is and is not hard to find and expensive, and then kind of using that to your advantage to get stuff that you do want for yourself necessarily that maybe is already harder to find.
Yeah, you got to watch the trends and
like you gotta, like I said, you gotta watch the you gotta watch the trends. You always got to go against the flow a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I said, the reason a lot of these games are collectible is because people didn't care about them, right?
Once upon a time they didn't, and now they do.
They throw it in the garbage. They'd be like, this is crap, whatever, I don't care about it. And now it's like, but now it's rare because nobody bought it. And that's why it's expensive, because nobody bought it. Now a lot more, everybody's buying, everybody's hoarding stuff too, that makes it where I don't think we're going to see like stadium events. We're not going to see like, sealed Mario Brothers. So we're not really going to see that stuff nowadays, just because so much more is made, so much more is held on to, and people are going with that mentality of like, I need to keep it in pristine, perfect condition because one day it is going to be worth money. And it's like, well, it's not going to be worth like millions.
You hope it's going to be one day worth.
It's speculative, really, at the end of the day.
And that's at the end of the day, it's all speculation. But I think really to kind of just, I guess, summarize a bit, collect what you like. If you like playing games, you know what? If you like,
I only buy games that I'm actually going to play. I'm not going to buy a game just because everybody else is buying it and it's expensive.
Don't worry
if I'm not going to play, don't worry about the value. Play it, I'm not going to spend $300 on it.
Don't worry about the cost. Don't worry about what you're going to make out of it. Anything like that. It's not an investment. It's a game. Go buy the games you like to play them, and you know what? If you get bored of them or you have extra copies and it turns out they're worth money down the line, well, great.
Then bonus, right?
Go ahead, sell your extra copies, make some money, buy some more games you like. You can never be disappointed if you're buying the games you love.
Right.
Exactly.
And don't forget, even reproduction carts exist.
Yeah,
they're also a thing.
Yeah, there's always alternative ways to play. There's things like EverDrives and stuff like that you can just buy one of those. And you always have a way. You always have an alternative option to play what you want to play.
Yeah, end of the day, it boils down to you. What do you want to play? If you really love the game, well, nothing's going to really stop you from actually trying to get that game if you really wanted to.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so another nice one. Let's kind of cut it off with that, I guess.
Yeah, I think we can wrap this one up. I think we've talked this one to death. So
yeah.
All right, so I guess we'll see you next time. Please like, comment, subscribe to Retzone.ca, and we'll catch you on the next one.
We'll see you later.
See you in the next video.
Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.